Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're diving deep into the world of cement. Getting ready for that big meeting I have coming up.
Always good to be prepared.
Right. So I've been digging into this book, How to Do Business Analysis of Cement Companies. It's by Dr. Vijay Malik.
Ah, yes. Dr. Malik, he really gets into the nitty-gritty of the industry.
Yeah, and I always thought cement was pretty straightforward, but
Oh, it's anything but.
the first thing that really surprised me is how competitive this market is.
It's incredibly competitive. I mean, think about it. Cement is a commodity.
Right. It's not like people are brand loyal to a certain type of cement.
Exactly. You don't see people saying, oh, I only use this brand of cement. It's all about price.
So basically, these companies are constantly battling it out to offer the lowest price.
You got it. And Dr. Malik, he actually uses some great examples in his book. He pulls from industry reports to show just how cutthroat it can get.
Wow, so even small differences in production costs can make a huge impact.
Absolutely. Every penny counts in this industry.
Okay, so competition, check. But there's also this whole cyclical thing with the cement industry, right? These booms and busts.
Yeah, it's like a roller coaster. You have these periods of huge demand. Think about it, like when there's a surge in infrastructure projects.
Like new roads, bridges, all that.
Exactly. Everyone needs cement, and suddenly the demand skyrockets.
Boom. Okay, that makes sense. But then, what triggers the bust?
Well, eventually those infrastructure projects wrap up, right? And then you have the housing market.
Oh, yeah, of course. Cement is a big part of construction.
Huge. And Dr. Malik actually points to S&P's analysis. They tie real estate cycles directly to the cement industry's performance.
I see. So when the housing market slows down, cement demand takes a hit.
Right. And to make matters worse, cement companies tend to overreact.
Overreact how?
Well, when demand is high, they rush to expand their production. They think it's going to last forever. But then...
But then demand drops, and they're stuck with all this excess capacity.
Precisely. And that's when you see prices plummet. It's a recipe for volatility.
Okay, so we've got fierce competition and this crazy roller coaster of demand. But what about the actual production of cement? What are the biggest cost factors?
So Dr. Malik breaks it down into three main categories: coal and power, transportation, and raw materials.
Coal. I get that.
Yeah.
It's used to heat the kilns, right? But how much do global coal prices impact the industry?
More than you might think. Dr. Malik uses Japan as an example in the book.
Japan. I wouldn't have thought of them.
Right. But even with all their advanced technology, they still depend heavily on coal for cement production.
So if the price of coal goes up worldwide, Japan feels it. And
then those higher costs get passed along to consumers. It's a chain reaction.
got it. Okay, so what about transportation? I mean, cement is heavy, moving it around must be expensive.
It is. Actually, there's a fascinating finding from the Competition Commission of India, the CCI. They found that cement is rarely transported further than 200 to 300 kilometers from the plant.
200 to 300 kilometers, that's it.
Yeah, any further than that, and the transportation costs just eat into the profits.
So location, 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 right? Being close to your customers is crucial.
Absolutely. All right, now for the last piece of the puzzle, raw materials. This is where things get interesting.
Okay, tell me more.
It's not just about digging up limestone anymore. Companies are getting really innovative to try and reduce their reliance on traditional materials.
Oh, like what?
They're actually using industrial byproducts like fly ash and slag.
Fly ash, isn't that from coal-fired power plants?
Yep. And slag comes from steel production.
So they're taking stuff that was basically considered waste.
Exactly. And they're turning it into a valuable resource. It's a win-win.
They lower their costs, and they're also helping the environment a bit. Smart.
Very smart. Speaking of smart, have you noticed how the cement industry is trending towards these huge mega companies?
I have. Why is that? Is it just a power grab?
Well, there's a concept called economies of scale. As companies get bigger, their production costs per unit of cement go down.
Oh, I see. Like buying in bulk. The more you buy, the cheaper the price per item.
Exactly. Now, Dr. Malik highlights this really interesting comparison in his book. He compares India and Japan. In India, the top 20 cement companies control around 70% of the market.
Okay, that's a pretty significant chunk.
Right, but in Japan, the top 3 companies control over 80% of the market.
Wow. So size definitely seems to matter in this industry.
It does, but there's a catch. Dr. Malik also points out that expanding into other areas like ready-mix concrete doesn't always lead to higher profits.
Really? Why not? You'd think controlling more of the supply chain would be beneficial.
You'd think so. It's called forward integration, and in theory, it makes sense. But in practice, it often leads to lower profit margins.
Hmm, interesting. So bigger isn't always better.
Not necessarily. It's all about strategy, choosing your battles.
Okay, so we've talked about the intense competition, the cyclical nature of demand, and the importance of managing costs. Now, I have to ask about this whole cement cartel thing I read about.
Ah, yes. That's a bit of a juicy topic.
It is. So the Competition Commission of India, the CCI, they investigated allegations of price fixing.
Right. Basically, the allegation was that instead of competing fairly, these companies were working together to keep prices high.
And what did the CCI find?
Well, they found evidence that companies were reducing production, even when demand was strong.
Wait, what? Why would they do that? That doesn't make any sense.
It does if you're trying to create artificial scarcity.
Oh, I see. Restrict supply, drive up prices.
Exactly. And the CCI didn't take this lightly. They imposed a massive penalty on the companies involved, over 6,700 crore.
Wow. That's a serious fine.
It shows how seriously they take anti-competitive behavior.
So what happened next? Did the companies just accept the penalty?
Actually, no. They appealed the decision, and the case is still making its way through the courts.
So this whole cartel thing, it's still an open question.
It is, and it raises some really interesting questions about how cement prices are determined in India.
Right, like are we paying artificially inflated prices for cement?
That's the million-dollar question. Right, now, on top of all this, you've got international players entering the Indian market.
Yeah, why are they so interested in India?
Well, for one thing, demand for cement in more developed markets like Japan is shrinking.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So they're looking for growth opportunities elsewhere.
Exactly. Plus, S&P did some analysis that Dr. Malik cites. They found that emerging markets often have higher profit margins.
Ah, so India is a pretty attractive target for these global cement giants.
Very attractive. It's a big market with lots of potential.
This is a lot to take in. I'm starting to realize the cement industry is way more complex than I initially thought.
Oh, it's a fascinating industry, full of twists and turns, and you're already on your way to becoming a cement expert.
Well, I've got a lot more to learn, but this is a great start.
We've just scratched the surface, really. But hey, at least you're not walking into that meeting blind anymore.
That's for sure. This deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about.
Okay, so we've laid the groundwork. We've talked about the big picture of the cement industry. Now let's think about how you can use all this to really make an impression in your meeting.
Right. I'm starting to get it. The big forces at play. Competition, those crazy cycles, the cost pressures. But how do I actually use that to look at a specific company?
Ah, that's the real skill. And luckily, Dr. Malik gives us some excellent tools in his book to do just that. Remember those cost drivers we talked about?
Yeah. Coal and power, transportation, and the raw materials, right?
Exactly. Those are your starting point. Look at how a company is handling those costs and you'll learn a lot. Like, let's take coal. Are they smart about it?
What do you mean?
Well, are they getting their coal from just one supplier? That's risky.
Oh, right. Because if something happens to that one supplier, they're in trouble.
Big trouble. You want to see companies that are spreading out their risk, getting coal from multiple places.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And it shows they're thinking ahead.
Exactly. Now, think about those alternative materials we talked about, the fly ash and slag.
Yeah.
If a company is using those, that tells you something.
That they're innovative.
Yes,
Yeah.
they're finding ways to be more sustainable and to lower their costs at the same time.
Which is good for the environment. A&D, good for their profits. Win-win.
Exactly. Now, let's not forget transportation. That's a killer in this business. Remember, we talked about that 200, 300-kilometer sweet spot.
Oh, yeah. Any farther than that, and
Yeah.
it just gets too expensive.
So check where a company's plants are located. Are they close to their customers? That makes a huge difference.
Right, because it cuts down on their shipping costs.
Yeah.
Which means they can be more competitive on price.
Now, beyond those operational things, we also got to look at the money, the financials. How healthy is a company?
Okay, what should I be paying attention to there?
Dr. Malik stresses debt levels. This industry requires a lot of upfront investment.
You mean building those giant cement plants?
Exactly. So companies often take on a lot of debt to do that, and that's not always a bad thing, but
You need to see that they can handle it.
exactly. Look at their debt-to-equity ratio. That'll tell you how much debt they're using compared to their equity.
High debt-to-equity ratio, that's a warning sign?
It could be. It might mean they're overextended, taking on too much risk.
Okay, so I want to see a debt-to-equity ratio that's, I don't know, reasonable.
Yeah, something that doesn't make you nervous. Also, look at their cash flow. Are they bringing in enough money from their operations to pay their bills?
including those debt payments.
Especially those. Even if a company has a lot of debt, if they're generating strong cash flow, they're in a much better position.
Got it. So it's not just about how much debt they have, it's about whether they can actually handle it.
Now, numbers are important, but we also got to look at the big picture. What's a company's overall strategy? Where are they trying to go?
Yeah, they need a good plan, right? Not just drift along.
Exactly. Check out their growth plans. Are they focused on expanding in their current markets? Or are they trying to break into new areas?
And how are they going to deal with those crazy ups and downs in demand? Do they have a plan for that?
These are all key questions. You want to see a company that's thinking strategically, that's aligning their actions with their goals.
And don't forget those international players we talked about. How are they fitting into the picture?
Ah, yes. They're a wild card. What are their strategies? Who are they targeting? You need to know that to understand the competitive landscape.
This is a lot to digest, but it's really helpful. I'm starting to see how I can actually use all this information to analyze these companies to see their strengths and weaknesses.
That's exactly what we're aiming for. You don't want to just rattle off facts and figures in your meeting. You want to show that you can actually think about this stuff.
Okay, there's one more thing I wanted to ask about. We talked about that whole cement cartel thing, the CCI investigation. How do I bring that up in my meeting? I don't want to sound like I'm accusing anyone.
Good point. It's a sensitive subject, but you can definitely bring it up in a thoughtful way. Instead of pointing fingers, focus on the big picture.
Like, what do I say?
You could have something like, how do you think this CCI investigation is going to impact the industry in the long run?
Yeah. Or, what are companies doing to make sure their pricing practices are fair and transparent?
Exactly. Those are great questions. You're raising the issue, but you're not making accusations. You're encouraging discussion.
I like that. Okay, now for a totally hypothetical question. Just something I've been wondering.
Shoot.
What if the CCI actually succeeds in breaking up this alleged cartel? I mean, what would happen then?
That's a big what if. But it's an interesting one to consider. If those companies were forced to compete, truly compete, without any funny business.
We could see some major changes, right?
Potentially. For one thing, we might see a price war.
A price war.
Yeah, if they're not colluding anymore, they'd have to compete on price, which could drive prices down.
And that would be good for consumers, right?
It could be. Lower cement prices could lead to lower construction costs, which could stimulate more building projects.
Oh, I see. So in the long run, it could actually lead to higher demand for cement.
It's possible. And don't forget about housing. Lower cement prices could make building homes more affordable. That would be a huge benefit.
So breaking up the cartel, it's not just about punishing bad behavior. It could actually have some real positive effects on the economy.
Potentially. But of course, there could be some downsides too. Some companies might not be able to survive in a truly competitive market.
The ones that have been relying on those inflated prices.
Exactly. They might not be as efficient. They might not be able to compete on a level playing field.
So it's complicated.
It always is. And we can't forget about unintended consequences. It's hard to predict how the market would react to such a big change.
Right. There's always that risk. Okay, well, I feel much more prepared for this meeting now. Thanks for all your help.
Anytime. Remember, the cement industry is dynamic. It's always changing. What seems like a sure thing today could be completely different tomorrow.
That's a good point. I'll definitely keep that in mind. And for our listeners, stay tuned. We'll be back with more insights on the cement industry in our next episode. Wow, we've really dug deep into this cement world, haven't we?
We have. It's been quite a journey.
From the basics, like how cement is even made.
To the global forces that are shaping this industry.
Competition, those wild price swings, the whole cartel situation.
We've covered a lot of ground.
And I think the biggest takeaway for me is that this industry is not just about, rocks and kilns and concrete.
Oh, definitely not.
It's about strategy.
About innovation.
About making smart choices in a really complex landscape.
And it's about ethics, too.
Right. We can't forget about that. These companies, their decisions have a real impact on people's lives.
Absolutely. On communities, on the environment.
So to our listener out there thinking about this industry, whether you're prepping for a meeting or just curious.
Keep asking those tough questions.
Yeah, don't just take things at face value.
Dig deeper.
Challenge assumptions.
Think about the long-term consequences.
Because knowledge is power. But it's how you use that knowledge that really matters.
Use it wisely.
Ethically.
To make a positive difference.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So thanks to everyone for joining us on this deep dive into the cement industry.
We hope you found it insightful.
And maybe even got you thinking a little differently about that bag of cement mix. at the hardware store.
The world is full of fascinating stories.
And we'll be back soon with more deep dives to uncover those stories and to help you make sense of them.
Until then, keep learning
Keep exploring.
and keep questioning.
That's what we do here on The Deep Dive. See you next time.